Well, the year ahead, this is it. This is what we're going to be talking about today. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to the RevelatorAlf podcast. I hope you're all well. If you like what I do here, don't forget to do the usual things that you would do when you're watching videos or listening to podcasts, subscribe and all that kind of stuff. You can catch this podcast on all the platforms, Spotify, YouTube now, and Google and Apple and all those kind of fine places. But I thought I'd start this podcast today to discuss not necessarily my year ahead, but the year ahead. We're at the time of year in January where everything seems possible, right? Everything is in the planner, or it could be potentially in the planner, the pencil entry, as it were. And there's so much to look forward to. There's so much going on right now. And you think, well, what can this year hold? Now, as you get older, well, certainly as I've got older, time flies so much quicker. It only seemed like a heartbeat since this time last year and the year before that. 2023 just went so fast. And I actively, purposefully changed a lot of what I was doing last year to slow down, try to slow down in lots of things that I was doing. And that really came out in a lot of the work that I was doing sort of behind the camera or behind the scenes, as it were, not only with my YouTube channel, but also with the website, but also with my work life as well. My work-life balance had to change as well. So 2023 was a really busy year for me. And I'm sure it was for many other people as well. And when you're really busy, life just goes so quickly. But what I've noticed that as I changed my schedule, as I changed my workload, I had some extra free time and I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to fill my time. So then I had to kind of work a new schedule, as it were, or a new way of working that I found a happy balance where I was producing content for podcasts or for YouTube videos or for the website, but I wasn't overproducing. So then I made the decision to launch different YouTube channels to reflect the kind of interest that I had and also what potentially I could be doing in the future. Not necessarily focus on them now, but what I could be doing in the next 4 or 5 years. So they're very slow burn channels, media outlets, media platforms, if you like. And podcasting was one of those things that I actually did many years ago in another media life, as it were, when I was involved with a lot of education, online education. And I used to do, and it was all around motorcycles and motorcycle safety, and I produced a lot of online content. At one stage, I even had my own online radio station as well, and then I would do podcasts on there and read out lots of things on there. So there was a 24-hour loop that was continuously broadcasting, and so I put on podcasts. So I've been doing podcasts for a long time, but in recent years I kind of stayed away from it, really, or I jumped in and out of it. I wasn't really that interested in it. But the audio format is the one that actually always interested me the most. Out of all the media content, actually, the audio format, podcasting, radio, has always interested me the most. Because it didn't rely on a visual. It didn't rely on doing something that was extraordinary. It just relied on good conversation, good information, or engaging information as well. So that's what I always liked. But from a user's point of view, I always liked either radio or podcast, especially because it allows you to do something else. It allows you to walk the dog. It allows you to do some work on your house, or even, in a professional capacity, whatever your day job is. If you've got music or you've got a podcast going on in the background, you can still do whatever you need to do, right? The only thing that it stops you doing is when you're involved in media, as it were, and let's just say you're making a video and you're trying to edit a video. Then you need to have a headset on, and then you're trying to listen to the audio. So you have to be very zoned in to what you're doing there. But anything else, really, you can listen to an audio whilst you're doing something else. So that's why I really liked it from a user's point of view. And ever since I was a kid, I would always be listening to the radio and doing something else as well. So the radio was a really big thing here, and I know in certain parts of the country maybe, or certainly certain parts of the world, radio seems to have taken a bit of a nosedive. In this country, I don't think it has per se. I think it's still going very, very strong. But obviously the rise of podcasting has really sort of taken over in many different ways, and you can fine tune to exactly what you want to listen to by podcast categories, let's say, as opposed to listen to a general radio station. But then the radio stations have split and gone niche as well. You've got talk radios, talk sport radios stations. You've got music, different types of music radio stations as well, haven't you? So that's all divided up. So I think in other parts of the world, maybe radio stations are maybe been on a decline a little bit and overtaken by podcasts, but I would say it's kind of even Stevens here. In fact, I would say that in some cases the radio stations are a lot more popular over here for the average person. But so I was always looking at the next year ahead. I had to reflect on what I was doing last year, change what I was doing, change the process, look at what I was doing, whether it was really sort of worthwhile for me. And one of the most valuable things that I play with, if you like, is time. Time is the most valuable commodity for me. It's not money, it's not possessions or anything like that. It's time. Time has always been the biggest factor, and the things that I want to do and the things that I can't do. And I'm already looking now at this year, and I'm thinking, time. Where could I fit this time in? Where could I do that? So I changed a lot of things, what I was doing from the midpoint of last year up until Christmas. Then I took quite a substantial break off, really. And in the background of this, I've always been tweaking and working on the website, but also reworked that so it's a lot less labor intensive. And there were a lot of good things that happened last year. Lots of good things. But now that was last year, so now I'm looking to this year as well. I'm planning my planner or planning to do something different. So, I'm looking at things I'm really interested in. Sports, of course. Motorcycles, obviously, being another one. But sort of general things that are happening to my life, or really interesting stories as well. And things that are happening in society. So I've never really been a very political person, but I look at issues that go on in the world, or certainly that happen in this country, and I just think, where's the thinking here? What's going on here? So I don't necessarily want to dive into news stories or just deliver topical stories, and this is why this podcast here is it's not topical at all. It's actually about my thought process, and maybe your thought process too, about looking into the future. But it's about identifying what I find really interesting, and then delivering content based upon that, or just talking about it, or producing videos, or whatever. So I also needed to change the way I was making content as well, and bring it more into a studio-based kind of thing, rather than outside. I'm still going to make videos outside on my motorcycle, let's say, but the primary aspect of what I'm going to be doing going forward is a studio base as well, because it gives you a lot more control, it gives me a lot more latitude and what I want to do, and actually it kind of feeds really nicely into the podcasting, but also producing audio content in line with video content as well. So this is where I'm moving. I know on some of my videos recently, quite a few people, and then this is an interesting thing actually, one of the things that I stopped doing last year was trying to engage with every single person who made a comment, or trying to respond to every comment. I just didn't have the time, and I had to free up time to stop looking at the comments so much, or stop trying to read them so intently, or stop trying to think about what an individual person has said. So I stopped all that, and I just made so much time. I actually stopped all my social media as well. I cancelled everything. So the only things that remain are the YouTube channel, or channels now, and the website. But everything else just stopped. It was all closed down. And this is all about time. It's about regaining time and just developing my own thought processes without a lot of interference, and also not wasting time as well. But so there was, as I say, there was a lot going on last year. I say, got rid of the social media. I stopped trying to respond to the comments, and now I just rest assured that the comments that ever I get, either on my website or on the YouTube channel, videos, or on any podcast or audio piece that I produce as well, I do read them. I do read them, but I just don't necessarily answer them anymore as well. There's just too many. There's just too many of my historical videos that people may want to watch, and they suddenly ask a question on there. There's too many, so I just stopped doing that. In fact, I was listening to another podcaster a while ago, and actually they repeatedly talk about it. They're saying that they never look at their comments. They never look at their comments, because the positive comments are only going to inflate your ego, and the negative comments are only just going to make you feel bad. Either way, it's a false way of living. It's a false way of reflecting on yourself, but also on the world. And it's great that people leave comments and want to engage, and it's even better when the comments section start discussing with each other. And that's more of what I see the way it should be. People having conversations within a comment section, rather than trying to have a conversation with me. And there are ways to contact me directly via the website as well. So if people wanted to do that, that's great. I mean, that's not a problem. But again, this whole long diatribe is all about looking forward and what you're going to be doing this year. Because granted, if you're a busy person, time will fly really quickly. It will fly. It will just fly really quickly, and you'll get to the end of the year, or the mid part of the year, and you think, wow, that flew by. What's going on? And you'll always be chasing your tail into, what to do next, or what can you do? How can you change things? So I've made, these active changes over the last 6 months, I suppose. Definitely, I've been talking about it for about a year now, really, about changing things. But there's so much for me to look forward to in terms of my interests. Obviously, I'm a big sports fan, so football is my big passion. Here in the UK, soccer, to those who don't recognise football as a term. It's only football for us, of course. But we've just got there's the first cup final coming up very, very soon, the League Cup final. That's going to be an interesting one, because Chelsea have made it to a final when everybody thought they were in no man's land after starting so poorly. They've made it to a final. Liverpool looking mightily strong, and they've got into the final. So that's going to be a really interesting final. I mean, I can't see Liverpool losing that, but there we go. We'll never know. Then we've got the league, the Premier League, and all the leagues in all the countries in their second half of the season, as it were, and then in the final stretch. That'd be really intriguing to see how the teams develop, and how the wins and losses are really going to affect each league standing. And then at the end of the year, you can have obviously the league results, but then you can have the end of year cup finals as well. So all national cup finals, and then European cup finals, or the continental cup finals, wherever they are. And then you got the summer leagues. You got the summer football, summer action, whatever it is, taking place. And then you got the internationals. You got the Euros taking place, of course. So huge 6 months of action to happen. At the end of the football season, this is kind of what happens here in the UK around about May, middle of May, traditionally it was. You kind of breathe a sigh of relief, and you think, it's good to get a break from football, the intensity of football, trying to follow a football team. People don't know I'm a huge West Ham fan, and my thoughts on my team kind of go from pure joy to pure despair to anger to frustration to bewilderment a lot of the time. And I'm sure I'm no different from any other fan of any other club in the world, but you kind of wonder how your team's going to develop, how your team's going to do, but you reach the end of the season. For me it's almost like a sigh of relief. Think, right, okay, the season's over, I can take a break. And then you have an international football coming up, and you think, so you have to ramp up for that, the international football tournament, let's say Euros or the World Cup or whatever it is. But if you don't have that international football tournament in one of the off years, you kind of go 2 or 3 weeks into the summer, and then you kind of think, I'm missing my football now. When's the season start? So you can't wait until mid-August, the end of August, to come round again, where the football season start again. But then, luckily, football never really goes away, because there's always some kind of game going on within football. You get the pre-season friendlies that start happening in sort of July, the tours of the clubs, and then you get European qualifiers taking place. So, you kind of think, a bit of downtime, but actually there isn't a lot of downtime. Boxing is another huge interest of mine. I always loved boxing. I always loved combat sports that was what I call stand-up fighting. It doesn't necessarily need to be boxing. It could be something like kickboxing or Muay Thai or anything like that. But I've always liked stand-up fighting as a preference to watch. And boxing was kind of the pinnacle for me. It's always been that pinnacle of watching it since I was a kid. Absolutely loved it. Loved just the technicality of it. And as I've got older, I've just appreciated that more. So, a lot of what I enjoy watching are the fights. With football, and also with any sport, football, boxing, it's the absurdities within those sports that I find really interesting. So if I'm talking about football, for example, I can make a video or a podcast on some of the decisions that are made, or some of the injustices, but in some of the things that just make you think, what the hell's going on here? Why have they done that? And the same in boxing and in any other sport. I'm a big fan of motorsports as well, and of course motorcycle sports as well. But all motorsports I've always had a big passion for, and it's an interesting one thing there, because you don't have as many injustices really within those sports. You do have big controversies, of course, but I wouldn't say on a race by race or a game, but you can't compare a race by race to a game by game or a fight by fight. I think there's a lot more controversies, a lot more interesting stories in the other sports rather than motor racing. But I'd say it's compelling to watch, I think compelling to talk about. But the most stories that I find really interesting, the ones in sort of combat sports, but also properly football. There are lots of the sports that I'm really interested in, but I wouldn't say I'm certainly not knowledgeable about, certainly not that passionate about, but I would say just a passing interest. I suppose you call me a casual fan, and everybody loves the Olympics when they come along, and we all get really we become overnight experts, don't we, when something like the Olympics come on. You start watching weightlifting and you think, oh yeah, God, not very good jerk there, no, not very good. Or you're watching the rowing and think, God, not good on the oars there, not good on the oars, You have no idea what you're talking about. No idea what you're talking about. But you kind of try and convince yourself and convince anybody who's wanting to listen to you that you kind of have a rough idea. The thing is that this is when I used to do a lot of videos for, and do a lot of writing as well for football channels, especially West Ham channels, but some football media, diverse football media as well in the past. Anybody can have opinion, and everybody has a right to an opinion. In my opinion, everybody has a right to an opinion. And sometimes those opinions are a little bit outlandish, of course, and some people they jump the gun, or they have very polarizing opinions, let's say. So sometimes those opinions are not really justified. But I still stand by the fact that everybody deserves an opinion, but also has the right to deliver that opinion. Now, it doesn't mean that they're right, and it certainly doesn't mean that anybody has to listen to them, but they have the right to do it. What I found interesting for many, many years, and this is why I always defend football YouTube channels or boxing YouTube channels, let's say, for example, primarily, but any independent person wanted to deliver their comments, because for the longest time, the official media, the mainstream media or sporting media, kind of dismissed football opinion or football fan opinion or boxing fan opinion for years and years and years. It was only the mainstream media that could deliver any interpretation. So the frustration was for many, many years that what they're saying is actually not what the fans feel. It's not what the fans are seeing on the at the games, or their interpretation is totally different. Or you get some ex-footballer or ex-fighter who's talking about what you find passionate about or what you're a big fan of, let's say a football team, and they're talking about your team in a, let's say, a negative way and making judgments about your team or what's going on within your club, for example, and you're saying, what do you know? You don't know that. We know, we're the fans. We see it, we live it, we breathe it. You don't even know. And this still happens today, of course. It still happens today. So this kind of gave rise to the Football Fan channel. Really, that was where it kind of started, where people, fans all over the world now have got Football Fan channels. But with platforms like YouTube, they realized that they could bring out their own opinions, and that these opinions can be based on anything, right? It could be based on knitting, could be on painting, or whatever it is. That's the whole point of YouTube, really. It's YouTube. It's your opinion, your entertainment, your way of seeing the world. Whichever way you want to do it, it's about you bringing yourself out there or putting yourself out there. And it's the same for Football Fan channels, isn't it? They rose by fans wanting to get out there and put their opinions out there and actually almost be a competitor, or an alternative voice to mainstream media opinion. So no, this is Football Fan media. And for the longest time, Football Fan channels were really dismissed by mainstream media, and some people on some sports radio channels still kind of dismiss them as well. But actually, that's really changed in the last 2 or 3 years, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 years, where a lot of the mainstream media, they are really, really engaging with the fans and also with the fan channels. And some of these fan channels are very professional now. They've grown and grown in popularity, that whilst they are still football fan channels, the production value on a lot of those has grown and grown and grown, and they are big business now as well. But the mainstream media actually views them as professionals as well, or views them as worthwhile contributors to their content as well. So they're all operating in the similar kind of space, and this is where the landscape has changed dramatically over the last few years, where radio has also solidified in certain areas but weakened in other areas. The rise of YouTube and other platforms has given an individual the right to give their opinion. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, and we know there's a load of nonsense spouted by a lot of people out there. But you have to kind of work your way through the chaff just to be able to get, to kind of some kind of sensible opinion, let's say. But social media has also exploded, of course, as we know, unless you've been living in a cave. And that gives a rise to everybody just to vent and, spew their guts on any topic as well. But the people who are going out there and producing audio or video content as well, they're the ones who are really trying. Those are the ones who are trying to produce content that is an alternative to mainstream media as well. So it's changed. The what we kind of look for now, and what we kind of what we think of sport, and how we can share that opinion. We're not only sharing it amongst ourselves, but we're also sharing it with the world, and the world is kind of acknowledging and listening back. And when I say the world, not only other fans or other interested listeners or watchers, but of mainstream media. Media has changed, and we know that broadcast media has changed over the last few years, and not only in this country but all over the world. But also the printed media. Printed media is pretty much on a downward spiral. I just believe recently Sports Illustrated United States is going under. Quite a few other the big magazines of the last few years and publications have gone under as well. Some are just hanging on by their fingernails. Some have actually just had to move over to a digital platform or run that in parallel, and maybe just ditch the whole printed version as well. And we've kind of been talking about this in media production for many, many years. I had a magazine for many, many years, and I actually put one publication, one issue, I should say, in paper form. And it very, very quickly I realised it's just not. And this was just a startup, a magazine, of course. And I realised that there's no way if this is going to make it to paper copy. It has to go digital. It has to be digital so that people are accessing this on their phones and they can just view this whenever they want. And this is kind of when newspapers were starting to see the writing on the wall, and they were starting to think, what can we do next? And I was just starting to do it before certainly the mainstream was starting to think about it. And then soon after that, there was a big shift there, and it has changed now. There's a big shift in producing digital content rather than physical content. So things have changed. The media has changed, the way fans interact with it, and the way we deliver content, but also the way you produce that. So if you look forward and say you're looking forward, the year ahead, what next? What can change next? Not only from a personal point of view, I kind of told you how I'm thinking about changing or what I want to produce, but it's also what's coming back. What is going to come back in the next year? What big things are going to happen in society around the world that people are going to be talking about? What's going to go viral? What latest dance craze is going to happen? What is going to happen in social media? What's going to happen with politics, geopolitics, what's going to happen with the woke agenda, what's going to happen with lots of the issues that people have been really frustrated with, let's say, for the last couple of years. How is that going to change in the future? And those are the things that I find interesting now as I'm getting older. Not only am I interested in my past interests and my passions of motorcycling, let's say, for example, which I'm a huge fan of, not only engaged with, but I just love riding bikes. I've always loved all sorts of bikes. But it's not only that what I've always been interested, but it's all these other things that I've always been interested in, but I've never chosen to put out either on video or in an audio format. So I was thinking about this for a good year or so to say, well, actually, can I change the way I do things? Can I look at a 2024 with a fresh pair of eyes and change everything, change the way I look at it? And I think, well, if I just moved over to a podcast, then that's kind of jumping on the bandwagon that a lot of people have been doing for quite a few years now. And, there's a bit of backlash against podcasts, isn't there? A bit of backlash where people are saying, oh, crikey, you're not another podcast. Crikey, not another long diatribe as well. But I always come back to this. That for me, a radio station or a podcast is something from a user's point of view that I can use and I can have entertainment from whilst I'm doing something else. And if you want to watch the video version, great. If you want to sit down and actually watch the video version, fine. That's fantastic. But for those who want the audio format, this is exactly the way you can do it. and you can go and do something else. I used to do a load of live shows this time last year on one of my YouTube, well, actually on the RevelatorAlf YouTube channel, about the motorcycle channel, and I get repeated requests from people saying, "I've missed your show. Can you put this on an audio format?" Repeatedly, there were people would send me emails saying, "I like your shows, but I don't like watching them. I just want to listen to them. I want to listen to what you're saying as well." And I thought that'd be really interesting. Just to play with that in the future. I don't necessarily think I'll be doing more live shows. I was thinking about it, and I may return to that in the future. But it's more about just finding topics to discuss, finding things that I'm interested in, and sharing those as well. And if you find those interesting, great. But this is not really about just doing live shows for the sake of live shows. And I don't really want to do content that is just focusing on one particular product, particular company, particular sport, I wanted to diversify a little bit. And this is one of the reasons why I said, right, okay, I'm going to set up these 4 YouTube channels. One obviously already had pre-existing. The other 2 were for sports and for social commentary. The other one is just interesting views going forward, and I haven't really added anything to that really. But the concept really is just for the podcast to bring everything in, have the wider discussion topics, be unfiltered, but have the ability or have the desire to freely talk about things, and not feel that I have to stick to any kind of algorithm or have to worry so much about comment sections or whether the video is going to do well or anything like that. Because that has also been one of the big triggers of 2023 for me. It's the constant questioning. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? A lot of the fun started to go out of making YouTube videos, for example, because it was thinking, why am I doing this? I'm kind of making content that nobody's really watching. Nobody's really interested in watching. And if they do watch it, I'm either being accused of doing this, or people are complaining on what I've said without even watching the video in some cases. So it's kind of think, well, how do I change things up a little bit? How do I change things up that it's content that I want to produce, it's things that I'm really interested in, and maybe other people find interesting as well. But also it's not limited to a particular subject. Now, if you watch my motorcycle channel, RevelatorAlf, of course, on YouTube, you can also find all the stories and the links on the website as well in blog format. But if you look at those, I was constantly trying to tell people it's just a motorcycle channel, it's a motorcycle vlog, it's motorcycle ideas, it's all sorts of stories, and it has changed. It has changed over the years. But because I ride for the last 5 years, now it will be a particular brand of motorcycle, a Harley Davidson. People would watch it, think that I'm a Harley Davidson channel. And I kind of can't escape from that, and I can't blame people for thinking that, because you kind of make content of what you're doing, of what you're riding, of the kind of things that you're up to. But I tried painfully to explain to people, no, I'm not a Harley Davidson channel. I'm just a channel that talks about what I'm doing. If I'm riding a BMW next or a Kawasaki next, I'll be talking about that. But what I always found really interesting about the Harley Davidson content space, if you like, is that it's one of the biggest online discussion topics. People are always wanted to talk about it, and that's not why I bought my motorcycle in the first place. But certainly, it's not why I started producing videos about it at all. It was more about, well, again, sharing my ideas and sharing how-to ideas and what people could do, all that kind of stuff. And but I realised that people certainly latched on to what I was doing, and thinking that one, I was a Harley Davidson channel, and also bringing content or opinion that in some way was offensive to some people. That, you know, and then I realized that not only is it a very popular thing to discuss on likes of YouTube, but it's also attracts polar arguments, polar opinions. And some people are very, very ultra positive about the motorcycles. Great, there's no problem. Other people ultra negative, and either way I somehow got labeled as being a negative person. But what I was trying to say to people on a regular basis, to say, look, what I'm bringing you here is information, stories that I've heard, and a lot of what the way I was doing it and the way I have been doing it over the years is based upon my previous media experience with radio, online radio stations, motorcycle magazines, also safety campaigns, educational campaigns in the motorcycle space as well. Years, 40 plus years of riding motorcycles, 30 odd years of 35 years of working on motorcycles as well, fixing them, stripping them down, all that kind of stuff. So that's where I was bringing that information from, but people still thought I was either negative or only a Harley Davidson channel. So last year, again, there was a shift in what I was trying to do. I was trying to deliver content that was about me and my thought process in certain regards, about whether it's Harley Davidsons, but bikes I was going to ride and try out, and I'm potentially going to buy, or was going to buy as well. So it was all that kind of, I changed what I was doing. I actively stopped producing videos of how to fix something, or how to do something, or how to check something. I knew that I could just keep on going through a motorcycle and produce 10 videos a week, quite easily produce 10 videos a week about a particular content. Make really short, snappy videos, shorts, TikTok, all that kind of. I could do it all. It's not that the ideas aren't there. I constantly have a list of about 1,000 ideas of what I could do. But I didn't want to continue doing the same thing. And I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I was looking at myself, what I was doing, what I was saying, how I was saying it. And again, looking at the year ahead, looking at 2024 into 2025, 26, 27, 28. What am I going to be doing for the next 5-10 years? I'm no spring chicken anymore. So things had to change. Things that I was interested in possibly had to change, but how I was delivering that, whether on my website or whether on podcasts or YouTube videos, that had to change as well. And I always find it really interesting where people produce content on a particular subject, and they kind of focus in on a particular subject. And that could be great, but I've always found that very limiting. I always found that limited to say, well, surely you're interested in other things as well. And people are, of course. But they're trying to work YouTube so that it pays them to do it. They don't want to make videos about baking cakes when the YouTube channel that they have is all about archery or sword fighting or something like that. And they think, well, if you start making videos about baking cakes, then your archery or your sword fighting fans won't like it. And that's true. That's possibly true. But it doesn't really make your channel a rounded channel. It doesn't make your kind of delivery rounded either. And for me, it's not really about that I've lost my passion for motorcycles, or that I don't like producing content about motorcycles. It's just that I've got other interests, and I wanted to share those interests as well. And I also wanted other people to come on board as well and listen to other things as well, listen to opinions about other things. So whilst I'm not going to run away from the content that I've produced on the RevelatorAlf YouTube channel, And RevelatorAlf as a podcast, as the website, is still going to be the overarching umbrella, but there's going to be lots of offshoots off it, whether in sports, whether it's social commentary, or whether just media, general media as well. With that, and I go all the way back to the start of this podcast when I was talking about the year ahead, what's the year ahead, and also then what is my timetable going to be? How much time? The most precious commodity that I have is time. And as people get older, that time commodity gets even more precious, because we're on the back curve here. We know what's going on. We know we're heading one way and it's getting closer. So time is a precious thing. And then you're looking and say, right, okay, not only am I planning my day job, my work life, and my home life, and whatever I'm doing on a podcast, or whether I'm doing videos as well. Now, if podcasting or if video making, content creation is your job, is your main job, then there's a whole other dynamic. But if you've also got a day job, then actually time is very, very scarce. So people would ask, well, are you going to produce more content, or are you going to produce less content? I think now it's a case of, well, I'm going to produce content not necessarily to a timetable anymore. I'm going to try and aim for one a week, but I'm not hard and fast about that. What I'm really interested in is the topic, the discussion. What I'm really interested in, what is happening now, and what can I deliver over the next year or two. And the reason for this podcast is just to open up discussion, or open up our minds of what you guys are going to do, what other people are going to do out there. How are you going to spend this time, this next year? Now, it depends where you live, of course, because you might be living in an area where you have no idea what's going to happen from one day to the next. Whether it's a social issue, whether it's a national issue, whether you're living in a war zone, you don't know, So this kind of thing, listening to a podcast or watching videos, is the last thing that you're going to be interested in, the last thing you even care about. But what you're really interested in is your life. We've had this one of the senior military general here in the UK yesterday was talking about that actually when it comes down to it, all this social media stuff, people are distracted by what is really, really important, what is really necessary. Is that if you look at Ukraine, what's happened there is that people have had to defend their country. He said if England, if the UK had to defend itself against something like Russia or any other offensive country that came in, there aren't enough military personnel existing, serving or in reserve as reservists to defend this country. So we're saying there needs to be what they're labeling as a citizens' army. So there's either going to be a mandatory call-up or a mandatory draft into the military, or they're going to try and get young people to volunteer to come into the armed forces. Or what they're saying is there's going to have to be some kind of civil protection defense from people. This is what's for the future. So when you're talking about what's going to happen in the future, none of us knows. But it's interesting that social planners, society planners, national planners, the military are thinking along these lines. They're thinking about actually what's going to happen in the future. What are we going to be doing? Where are the main threats going to come from? All the things that people are focusing on these days, young people I'm talking about, not my age group, but younger people, they're kind of focusing on trying to, not all, we can't say all, that's ridiculous, of course it is, but there's a lot of younger people who are either influenced or hypnotized by the social media, or by trying to produce content, or getting onto TikTok, getting onto Instagram and everything. And this has kind of been a relatively new thing the last few years, hasn't it? The last few years, there's been a big upsurge in people just wanting to get onto these platforms and share everything that they are and doing ridiculous things. And because they know some of them can earn lots and lots of money. Then you got the rise of other things like private platforms, firewall platforms, or paywall platforms such as OnlyFans, where people are producing content behind those platforms, and in most cases, it's kind of adult themed content. We know that, of course, we know that, right? You don't have to live in a cave to know what's going on there. Not all content behind these paywall platforms like OnlyFans is adult themed. It could be that it's exclusive. It might be that you're a famous person, a famous music artist, famous actor, or whatever it is, and you're going to put your online content behind a paywall. So if people are interested in what you're doing at home, let's say, or when you're out in the garden, or things that you're doing, you're going to put it behind a paywall, so you'll get extra income from it. And that's what people have been doing. But it's interesting to think that these actual military planners, social planners, they're saying that the people who've been doing that, they would be lost. They would be totally lost in hard times. And as you get older, you look at some of the things that are said in the media or said online by younger people, but also like a woke agenda, like whatever it is, like trans activists, trans politics, whatever it is. If something happened with the world or something happened with the country, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to defend yourself, or to help yourself, or to protect your friends, your family, whatever? What are you going to do? And we see this on a daily basis, where generations that have come through, but younger people coming through, who are going to be taking over the world in the future. If they carry on the pathway, if they carry on the way they've been acting, the way they've been doing things for the last year, 2 years, 5 years, the way they've been more vocal about lots of issues, do you think if they carry on in this pathway, there's going to get to a point in the future that nobody's going to be looking after anybody? Everybody's just going to be so self-indulgent. They're going to be looking at themselves and thinking they are the only important person in this world. And you would hope that maturity kicks in, and that these people would kind of understand there are greater values out there. There are more important things to be thinking about, and there are more important things that we should all be thinking about as well. And over the last year, there's been increasing backlash against this kind of woke agenda. But it's really interesting in public bodies, let's say within schools, within health sector, where there's been a lot of these organizations and institutions bending over backwards to help or to further these agendas. There's been a huge backlash from the public. Interestingly, the public, parents, let's say, I mean, a huge backlash and say, hold on a minute, yes, you're trying to address these issues, but you're totally alienating, the majority of the people. And you're forcing the majority of the people to think like a very small minority are thinking. Now, that's okay if you want to address the thoughts or the rights or the opinions of those minorities, let's just say. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to change or influence, especially the young, of people who don't think like that. And this is where there's been a huge backlash. And you're getting people who can, getting up in public meetings and calling out schools and school governors and headmasters for allowing this to happen and trying to convince everybody else that this is a good thing. And one of the big things, and we kind of bring this back to media as well, one of the big criticisms of not only social media, but actually of mainstream media, is that they haven't been more vocal in the broad sense of also pushing back against these woke agendas. They've almost been trying to popularize it as well in some cases. And the media itself, it kind of flows with the river, doesn't it? It flows with the times. And sometimes they'll be more right-wing than left-wing, and other times they'll be more left-wing than right-wing, and sometimes they operate the centre ground as well. But they haven't really come on the side of the right and the side of the just over the last few years. They've kind of been operating in this world where people are wondering, well, you watch the news, you're watching these educational programs, or you're watching some kind of political programs, or whatever it is, discussion programs, and you're watching this for some kind of common sense as an adult, okay, as an older person, and you're watching older people on these programs as well, and you're wondering, well, where is the common sense here? What are we talking? Why are we talking about issues that just don't need to be talked about? Or why are we making big deals of issues that don't need to be talked about? So this kind of observation of mine of the last couple of years, maybe even longer than that, 2 or 3 years, has kind of made me start thinking about other things more and more away from motorcycles. What I always loved about motorcycles is that, I was producing content for people, producing content that I was really interested in, but I thought would help people, or I thought would spark a discussion, or I thought would get people thinking about certain things that nobody else is talking about. And I still like that element. I still want to produce content that other people are not talking about, whether it's in sports, in boxing, or in football, bringing opinions. And it doesn't bother me that people disagree. I don't think it's appropriate when people are just hurling abuse at you. And I find it really funny where people will comment on your videos, put their opinion across, at the same time be quite insulting or negative towards you, and then also in some cases say, I'm not going to listen to you. Well, you just have listened to me. You've gone out of your way to watch this video or listen to this podcast, so now you're going to have to leave the comment behind. I find it really interesting. Whilst the comment section is really interesting and is also worthwhile, I find it really interesting that people feel compelled to comment in a negative way. That's what I find really interesting. I could do a whole podcast, a whole video about the comment section, and why people feel that anger, that negativity. They feel compelled to reply, or to reply in anger, or reply with negativity. Why? What is the driver here? It's just like, the old adage, if you don't like something on TV, you just turn it off, change channel, right? If you don't like what somebody's saying or what somebody's doing, just go do something else. But no, I have to tell you, tap, 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 that what you're doing is wrong, what you're saying is wrong, you are an arsehole, you are this, you are that. I just find it really interesting. Now, I find it a lot more understandable. Because maybe it's a reflection of my personality or the way I view things on life, where people feel compelled to say, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that, or actually there's another way of thinking about this. Have you thought about this? Have you thought? You enter a conversation with people who are bringing you information or alternative information without being negative or without being insulting. You can have conversations like this. People can do this. It just seems that when people get online, they lose the ability to have a normal conversation with people, conversations that you would have face to face with people. You wouldn't start engaging in a conversation with somebody, for the most part, when somebody's just delivering an opinion, then all of a sudden you start pointing your finger at them and saying, no, you're wrong, and start having a go. Some people might, of course, but most people wouldn't. Most people will say, well, look, have you thought about this? And there's another way of doing it. But then there's obviously, as I said before, there are those comments I find really interesting. Those that engage in a conversation, bring new information, and those are the comments I suppose that I would value the most. Also, it's nice to hear people saying, look, thanks for that. Thank you for what you've said. I really appreciate it. I totally agree with what you're saying. And yes, but as I said before, right at the start, comments like that, whilst they're really great, you've got to be very careful not to let those inflate your ego. Because I know of course, one can be very complimentary in one day and then very insulting or negative another day. That's just the way it is. So you kind of got to take those two polar extremes and just kind of keep them at distance a little bit. But the ones in the middle that are engaging, they want to have a conversation, yes, those are great comments. That comment section is great. And also when people are having conversations, as I say, amongst themselves, that is really great as well. But the ability of people to get online now, have conversations, have spats, have beefs with each other, let's say, or get into arguments or hurl abuse, I find that the motivation to do that, the driving factor to do that, I find that really interesting. From I don't know what the psychological trigger here is. I don't know what causes that. And it could be a desensitizing of people's actions. It could be that people have been using social media for a while. It started off on things like Facebook years and years ago, where people thought, I can write this and nobody knows where I am and I can just do this. And people stopped thinking about what they were saying or what they were writing and how it affects other people. This is what I've been talking about this recently, actually, where people say things, let's say in the workplace. They'll say things in the workplace and they're constantly saying things about another person to their face, having fun, having banter and everything. But what they fail to realize is this: even if the other person is laughing, let's say, what they fail to realize, if that the same kind of comment is made over and over again, and that other person is the butt of the joke, whether they're having fun about it, whether they don't mind it at all, when that person goes home, when that person leaves work, guaranteed at some point they'll be thinking about it. At some point they'll be thinking about what people have said about them or what people repeatedly say about them. Now, it'll either force them to get really hacked off, pissed off, upset, whatever it is. They may want to change their ways. They may want to close in. They may want to stop being themselves just for the fear of people reacting in a certain way like that. They may acknowledge where they're going wrong, or they find it totally absurd why people think like this about them. Regardless, people will think, they will take that on board. Now, it can be a negative thing, or it can be an extremely negative thing, an extremely destructive thing, or it could be in some cases a positive thing. But the point is that those people who are delivering that kind of information to other people, those are the ones that actually they don't know what they're doing. They don't know the impact that they're having on other people. And this is what I've said for a long, long time about people in the comment section, or the way society has moved as well, that there's less and less thought by individual people of how their actions and how their words and what they write and what they say, how it affects other people and what other people think. So by having more regard about what you say and what you write, not only does it invite people to have a conversation with you, but it brings everything down. I'm not saying you have to say anything to make everybody feel warm and fluffy. Far from it. What I'm saying is that actually what you're saying is that people can engage a lot better in the future. And when you're looking at a year ahead, this is the perfect time to start changing your ways, or change the way you're thinking about this, and looking at your own lifestyle and looking at the way you plan ahead, and look at all the kinds of things that you want to do. And it could be very simple. That, you know what, I want to step away from a lot of things that I'm doing. I just want to spend more time with my family, with my wife, my husband, my girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, children, whatever it is. I just want to do those things that I always wanted to do. I want to go off traveling. I want to go and do, I want to go and do kayaking every weekend. I just want to do something I'm Get away from the phones, get away from the computers, get away from the comment section, get away from people that are just not. I'm not saying that some people are toxic. I'm not saying that what people say online is toxic, but it might be affecting you. And this is what I say to people. So if you're not in the right headspace, then you're not going to perform, or you're not going to act in the best way that you possibly can as well. So by changing the way you outwardly portray yourself, or certainly the way I outwardly portray myself, is hopefully going to change my outlook and the way I do things as well. And it is. I'm making active steps to change the way I do things. And the reason is, yes, selfish reasons, of course it is, because you want your life to be better. And this is why I've been tweaking a lot of things the last couple of years, just to make my life better, not so reliant on the things that I'm doing or the things that I want to do. Not chasing a dream, not chasing an online dream, not chasing an algorithm, not chasing views, not chasing anything like that. It's just doing the things that I want to do, say the things that I want to do, and have interest in the topics that I want to have interested in. I think many people who would be listening to this podcast would be waiting for me, for example, to comment on the motorcycle manufacturer, which I talked about earlier on, Harley Davidson. They've just yesterday released their new motorcycle products, let's say, for 2024. Many people would say, oh, where's your opinion? Why haven't you said anything about it? And I'm purposely not going to say anything about it, because the truth is, they're a company. Think of them what you will. I don't think of them positively or negatively. I don't think of their products positively or negatively. I just have my own opinions, and maybe I'll deliver those on a video in the future. But it's just a business. And sometimes the business doesn't need me to talk about them. I can talk about other things that are more important and more interesting. Doesn't mean that I don't find what they've done interesting, for example. Let me put that out there. And what they've done and what they've done this year and what they've done the last few years, I find that quite interesting, and I find it as a topic quite interesting. But I think it's more interesting sometimes just to let it breathe, take a breather. So maybe in the next podcast I will talk about it. Maybe in the next video I will talk about that. But anyway, listen, I'm going to leave it there. It's been over an hour just talking about the year ahead, what I'm planning, what I'm thinking about, the way I'm going to attack different things. Planning my own life, planning the holidays and getting away, and timetables and the arguments and who's going to look after this and who's going to do that, and the never-ending struggle, just to get some time, just to make time for time, the most valuable commodity. And maybe that's what we should all do. Maybe. I'll catch you again, whenever that is. If you like what I do, don't forget to like and share all the podcasts and the videos. Go check out all those YouTube channels on the platform. It's RevelatorAlf, On Me Ed's son, and Alf Gasparo, just my channel as well. And you go check out the website, RevelatorAlf.com, and the podcast will be available on all the platforms. That's YouTube, Spotify, Google for the time being, and also Apple. And I'll catch you again. But got to go make some time now. Catch you again. Bye now.